Hello everyone, and welcome back to another True Crime Mysteries video. Thank you all for being here. Today we're discussing 3 more identified does. Let's get into it. Number 1. Newport Jane Doe. On November 17, 2012, a group of excited amateur treasure hunters gathered at an abandoned coal mining site on Alden Mountain in Newport Township, Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. The group had chosen the area as it had once been the home of a thriving coal industry, with mines dotted across the landscape. As the world began to move away from coal and fossil fuels, the mine shut down, leaving artifacts behind to be discovered by generations to come. This group readied their shovels and metal detectors, but their excitement was short-lived. Shortly after the digging commenced, some group members dropped their shovels in horror. They had come across something solid that let out a loud dink. When they shoveled the dirt away, they recoiled in horror as they discovered a long white bone staring back at them. Everyone in the group put down their shovels, took 10 steps back, and contacted the Pennsylvania State Troopers. The lively scene had now fallen into a somber mood. The Pennsylvania State Police cordoned off the scene and got to work recovering the remains, which were then transported to the local coroner's office. A few days after the discovery of the remains, the coroner's report was released, in which they noted that the remains likely belonged to a female in her late teens to early 20s. Her race was listed as unknown, but possibly an admixture of Caucasian, Hispanic, or Native American. The final parts of the coroner's report was probably the most chilling. It listed that the girl likely met foul play all the way back in the 1960s. How had her remains gone unnoticed and undiscovered for over 50 years? As the remains were determined to have possibly belonged to a teenager, NCMCE, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, became involved in the investigation. They created a composite sketch using her skull and circulated these images via news stations and social media. Whilst this did generate a few leads, none of them panned out, but the investigation was back to square one. A sample of her DNA was also submitted to police databases across the U.S., but again this generated no leads. Missing person cases were cross-referenced, but their leads fell apart each time investigators got close. In 2022, Pennsylvania State Troopers contacted Audrey Labs and asked for their assistance. The Newport Jane Doe's DNA had previously been run, but only through police and governmental databases. This time, Audrey was able to utilize public databases. Months after the DNA had been sequenced and cross-referenced against millions of samples, Audrey contacted the Pennsylvania State Troopers, telling them they had found a possible family member. This potential family member was contacted and asked to provide another DNA sample to develop a complete profile. Genealogists at Audrey also worked with them to create a complete family tree. In October of 2022, Audrey and Pennsylvania State Troopers announced to the world that the remains found in 2012 belonged to 14-year-old Joan Joni Marie Dymond. Joni disappeared from her home in Andover Street in Wilkes-Barre on June 25, 1969, after telling her family she was going to play outside. The family had just eaten supper, and Joni was never seen or heard from again. The Pennsylvania State Troopers are investigating what happened to Joni. Anyone with information is asked to contact the Trooper Edward J. Urban of the Pennsylvania State Troopers at 570-542-4177, quoting case number P04-0744558.
Finally, some answers in a cold case that dates back more than 50 years.
How the teenage victim was identified decades after she went missing. It's our top story on Newswatch 16 at 6. Good evening, I'm Lisa Washington.
And I'm Scott Shea. For more than 50 years after that teenager went missing, her remains have been identified. The task now, find out who killed her. State police held a news conference in Wilkes-Barre, sharing new details on the case and what the next steps are.
Newswatch 16's Brittany Workman explains the new information state police revealed today at the news conference.
More than 50 years after she disappeared in Luzerne County, the case of Joan Marie Dymond is one step closer to being solved. The 14-year-old was last seen on June 25, 1969.
After supper, she told her family she was going to go to the Andover Street Park in Wilkes-Barre, and she never returned. It was the last time Joan was ever seen by her family.
During a news conference at the State Police Barracks near Wilkes-Barre, Joan's older sister Suzanne told us that before Joan disappeared, she was ecstatic at the thought of becoming an aunt.
I was pregnant. I was due in August, and we spoke, and she was excited about being an aunt and me having a baby and coming down to visit and maybe help me out. And then she just disappeared.
Remains found in November 2012 at a former coal mining operation near Nanticoke have now been identified as belonging to Joan. State police provided photos of the location. Donations made to the Luzerne Foundation helped pay for the genetic genealogy tests that identified Joan's remains.
I know a lot of people believe that cases are forgotten. This is truly evidence that the cases are not forgotten.
It's a shame somebody so young and with her whole life ahead of her was taken. She was a sweet girl who didn't deserve what happened to her.
Investigators would not say how Joan died, but they call her death a homicide. State police hope former classmates from the class of 1973 at Myers High School may be able to help catch her killer.
We're talking people who went to school with her, maybe played sports with her, went to church with her. If you knew her at all, we're looking to speak with you.
Number 3. Mohave Jane Doe. January 23, 1971, 3 hunters making their way down the Hackesbury Road in a remote part of Mohave County, Arizona, near U.S. Highway 93, made a startling discovery. One of the 3 men had seen something that had caught his eye just off the dirt road. In the distance lay a white canvas sack that had been tied at the top with rope. Something about the bag immediately unsettled the men, and they decided to take a closer look. Upon inspection, the bag read, Deer Pack Ames Harris Neville Co., and something was inside. When they opened the bag, they found the body of a young woman. Horrified, the 3 men rushed back to their car, flagged down the first available officer, and within hours, the once quiet dirt road was now swarming with Mohave County Sheriff's Office investigators. Her body and the woven sack that she'd been found in were photographed and then transported to the closest coroner's office for autopsy. In the report, the coroner noted that the body belonged to a white female between the ages of 35 and 50, brown curly hair, and was about 125 to 140 pounds. It was also noted that the woman had an indentation on her left ring finger, possibly indicating that she had worn a wedding band or an engagement ring, and that she had a long scar on her abdomen. This scar possibly indicated to the coroner that the woman had given birth via cesarean section at least once in her life. This woman perhaps had a husband and children who would come looking for her, but this would later prove to be wrong. The report also detailed that her fingernails were meticulously manicured and that she was found wearing a size 14 long-sleeve shirt, black long-sleeved cardigan sweater, a size 12 burnt orange stretch pants, black leather ankle boots, and white socks. She had also undergone extensive and expensive dental work, with experts estimating that in 1971, these procedures would have cost around $2,000 or around $15,000 in today's dollars. This type of dental work was rare at the time and was reserved for those with money and access to good medical and dental care. With no immediate leads, investigators pinned their hopes on the woman's distinctive dental. Her dental x-rays were published in papers and dental journals across the U.S., hoping a dentist would recognize their handiwork, but no one came forward. After months with no one stepping forward to claim this woman, the Mohave County Sheriff's Department called her the Mohave Jane Doe. The coroner had ruled her passing a homicide and deemed that she had died due to strangulation. Multiple efforts were made to identify her, with her fingerprints being sent to the FBI and the Museum of North Arizona using her skull to create a composite sketch, but all of these efforts fell flat. Investigators could not believe that a woman who possibly had a husband and children could remain unclaimed. Months slowly turned into years, and the Mohave Jane Doe case turned cold. Investigators never gave up hope. In 1971, DNA analysis was another 10 years away. However, investigators ensured to preserve as much evidence as they could. This would come in handy many years down the line. The Mohave County Sheriff's Department left no stone unturned in this investigation. According to reports, they followed up on missing person reports from Arizona, California, Nevada, and Utah, checked hospitals, motels, hotels, and stores, and broadcasted sketches of Jane Doe across the states. In 2021, the Mohave Jane Doe was finally added to the NamUs database. The case found renewed interest thanks to the entry, and in 2022, the Mohave County Sheriff's Office teamed up with Othram Labs. Othram Incorporated, based in Texas, offered genetic genealogy services to governmental organizations. In 2022, they worked with the Mohave County Sheriff's Office to obtain a DNA sample from the Jane Doe. There was only one major issue that Othram faced was funding. The true crime community responded astoundingly, and the $6,500 needed to fund the DNA sequencing was raised in just 5 days. In January 2023, the long-awaited announcement from Othram was finally made, and the Mohave Jane Doe was identified as Colleen Audrey Rice. Colleen was born on March 17, 1931 in Portsmouth, Ohio, to James C. Rice and Flossie Truitt. In 1946, she married William Davis and became estranged from her family soon after finishing Portsmouth High School. Investigators could not determine whether Colleen had ever given birth, as no birth records had been recovered. The Mohave County Sheriff's Department is still looking for the person responsible for Colleen's murder. Anyone with information is asked to contact the Mohave County Sheriff's Office at 928-753-0753, quoting case number DR number 710383.
Colleen Audrey Rice was recently identified as the homicide victim found in a canvas sack in the desert in Mohave County, Arizona. Her case was reopened in 2021, and in 2022, genealogists were brought on board to determine her family tree. They were able to locate a living distant relative with the records they found and confirmed her identity. They also found that she's from Portsmouth, Ohio, and was estranged from her family. Records also show that she was married to a man named William Davis, who's from Ohio as well, in 1946. But no other information past that year has surfaced yet. But her story doesn't end there. In addition to being from Portsmouth, Ohio, investigator Miller says Rice also has connections to eastern Kentucky, and one of the challenges they're facing right now is finding people who were around when this incident happened.
Yes, this became quite daunting in the fact that trying to locate people who might still be alive.
I was able to find a distant relative of Rice. His name is Eli Allen, and he's from Scioto County, Ohio. Allen says when learning about the case and hearing the name, he soon found they were related.
When I saw Rice, which is in my mother's line, have to know how we're related because it was that much more intimate.
Allen is also a genealogist himself, and he says identifying one of his distant relatives who didn't have a name for more than 50 years is a testimony to the importance of the work he and so many others are doing.
To look back into and say this is how this person ties to this person. So without work of genealogists, that work would be much more difficult.
Number 2. Bucks County John Doe. In June 1986, a fisherman making his way down the Delaware River made a horrific discovery. Close to the Morrisville boat ramp on the Pennsylvania side of the river, the fisherman discovered a human skull right on the riverbank. According to Othram, as the fisherman lived in Buckingham Township, Pennsylvania, he turned the skull over to the Buckingham Township Police, and they handled the subsequent investigation. A sweep of the scene was conducted, but no other bones could be found. The coroner confirmed that the skull was human and likely belonged to an adult male. As the remains discovered were only partial, investigators had a hard time creating a profile. They could not cross-reference missing persons cases in the area, as the skull had no identifiable characteristics. In 1986, DNA testing was still in its infancy, and with few leads, the Buckingham Township Police called in the Bucks County John Doe. The coroner had also been unable to determine the cause of death, only adding to the mystery. Investigators had a few ideas about who the skull belonged to, but the case went nowhere without concrete evidence. For decades, the case remained cold until 2019, when the Bucks County Coroner's Office took possession of the remains. Once in possession of the skull, the coroner's office entered it into NamUs, hoping that this would aid in identification in the future. In September 2022, the chain of custody would change again when the Bucks County detectives obtained the remains from the coroner's office. This group of detectives then reached out to Othram Labs, one of the most prominent players when it comes to DNA sequencing and genealogical analysis. According to Othram, CBC News, Othram obtained a DNA sample from the skull and began searching through public genealogy databases for a match. And they got one. A 49-year-old woman whose name has been withheld per her request was found to be a match to the skull found in 1986. The woman from Florida told investigators that her father had disappeared in 1985 in Trenton, New Jersey. Another DNA sample was obtained from the woman, which confirmed the parent-child relationship between herself and the remains. In January 2023, Othram, alongside the Bucks County District Attorney's Office, announced that the Bucks County Jane Doe had been identified as 31-year-old Richard Thomas Alt. Richard was last seen by his parents on December 24th, in 1984 in Trenton, New Jersey. His disappearance was not reported until early 1985. In April 1985, the body of Richard's girlfriend, Lori Sydenham, was discovered in the Delaware River close to Trenton. Following this discovery and the reports of Richard's disappearance, investigators began treating both of their cases as suspected homicides. Unfortunately, investigators had no idea that Richard's skull had been discovered in early 1986. Minimal evidence and few leads led to the case being closed. Neither investigators nor Richard's family had any idea that his body had been found just 8.5 miles away from the Pennsylvania side of the Delaware River. Bucks County District Attorney Matt Weintraub told CBS News, quote, "I hope that this powerful combination of technology and genealogy becomes a template for solving cold case and current cases now and in the future. I can't imagine having lost a family member for even a day, let alone 37 years. That wait is now over for Mr. Alt's family. I'm just glad that we could give them some peace of mind with this identification and the eventual return of his remains to his family." The Bucks County District Attorney's Office has reopened the investigation into Richard's death. Anyone with information is being asked to contact the District Attorney's Office at 215-348-6344. Well, that's going to be it for this video. Thank you so much for sticking around until the end. As always, if you want to support the channel, the easiest way is to hit the like button. You can also subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss my next upload. Other ways to support the channel by joining my Patreon or channel membership. I also have merch, and you will find links to all that in the description box, plus a few extras. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter for more. But with that being said, thank you so much for being here and supporting what I do. It is very appreciated. That's it for me. I'll see you all in the next one. Bye for now.